Good evening. I would like to call the meeting to order. I apologize for starting a little bit late. We had some technical difficulties we have resolved. So to start with, roll call of attendance.
Done. Thank you.
Approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Sure. Moved by Julie, seconded by Kevin. Any discussion on the agenda? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is the approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Judy, seconded by Mike. Any discussion?
Before we vote on it, I just would like to thank the community for their contributions. We're accepting contributions of $12,000, most of which is coming from our parent-teacher organizations this time. We are very grateful for the effort of those organizations and the contributions. We will certainly use that money according to the wishes of the donors, but we are very, very grateful to the community.
Any other discussion on the consent agenda? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have no presentations or recognitions tonight, so we'll start with the report from our student representative, Claire.
This month at Wildwood, on the 6th, was the 7th graders performed a band concert for the Wildwood students. The 7th, 3M visited the 2nd graders. On the 22nd, Como Zoo visited the kindergartners. And on the 22nd, 1st grade field trip to Northrop Auditorium. At OH, there was a book fair from the 14th to the 21st. Family movie night, the 22nd. Turkey bingo will be on the 25th. And then at the middle school, their fundraiser brought in over $32,000. And the celebration party for that was a huge success. The 7th grade band concert went to Wildwood. And then student council had a fundraiser at Portillo's this Thursday, so tonight. And the student council is also starting a Cash for Kids drive partner with Maumee Good Neighbor Club. And then at the high school, the girls won the state tournament for soccer for the 3rd time in a row. Football won the section championship, and then Michaela Fisher competed at the cross-country state meet and was selected as Metro East Conference Runner of the Year. And then on November 21st through 23rd, the drama presents Schoolhouse Rock Live. And for all schools, there's no school November 27th, 28th, or 29th. And throughout November, there was conferences, and coming up in December, there will be a lot of choir concerts.
Thank you.
Did you mention the swim team?
I was just going to say,
Don't you have something to say about it tomorrow?
We have photos, if you don't talk about it, we might pull those up.
The swim team competed in the second swim meet last weekend, and we placed second, so, yeah.
And there's some going to state.
You were in the paper, right? Yeah. Good.
Tomorrow.
I recognize you.
You should
Yeah.
participate in the state meet.
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations. So, okay, next we have discussion and information items, starting with the board member calendar, which is in board books. If there are certain events people like to call out. I can start. I want to call out that our next meeting, it appears, because of the Thanksgiving holiday, will be December 12th. And that meeting starts a little bit earlier with the organization meeting before at 5:30. So make sure your calendars have that marked so we can have a discussion about organization of the school board for next year. Other things people like to call out, events? There's a very comprehensive list of events that people take a look at. Action items. First action item is the approval of the 2018-19 financial audit. Mr. Mazzi. I'm sure there's a spreadsheet, right?
There is.
is not a spreadsheet.
Oh.
First.
Oh, boy.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, there's no spreadsheet?
Yeah, there is a PowerPoint.
Okay.
Jim Eichten is here with us tonight. My role primarily is just to introduce Jim to make the presentation tonight. This is the 2018-19 audit, and one of the difficulties in this is already November, so we're almost halfway through the 19-20 fiscal year. So trying to turn back the clock in our memory a little bit and remember some of the highlights from 2018-19. So you will remember that in the spring of 2018, we went through a budget adjustment process, and that's really reflected in the audit report that you're going to see here tonight. So just trying to frame that up in your memory related to some of those adjustments that were made. Jim and his team were out 3 times last summer and into the fall for field work, audit field work. And I stated this last year, but it bears repeating. Certainly we value MMKR in the work that they do helping us with the audit both in the summer and the fall. The real value that I feel that they bring to our school district is the ability to call them and seek guidance from Jim and his team all year long. That's a big deal for us. We have a relatively small office, and that really helps us stay on the right track throughout the year. So thanks to MMKR for that work. And then finally, thank you to our staff in the business office. What you're going to see here tonight is a reflection on them and the hard work that they've done, and certainly want to recognize that work as well. So welcome, Jim.
Well, thank you for the introduction. My name is Jim Eichten. I'm with MMKR CPAs. I'm the managing partner with MMKR and the district's auditor. I'm here this evening to really formalize the audit process and complete the audit for the year. I did provide a PowerPoint. You can see here, and I'll cover that as part of this presentation. Hopefully the technology works. Yes, excellent. So the role of the auditor is to provide an opinion on the district's financial statements. The district is required annually to complete an annual financial statement. Actually, your district takes it a step further and completes what's called a comprehensive annual financial report. And that financial report is required to be submitted to the Office of the State Auditor in the state of Minnesota, as well as the Minnesota Department of Education. Your CAFR is actually submitted to the Association of School Business Officials for recognition for excellence in financial reporting. This past year, not this year, but last year was the first year the district received that certificate. There's a plaque hanging somewhere that shows that. So excellent work in that regard. As part of the audit, we are then required to, again, issue our opinion on that financial statement, but also follow other audit guidance, which includes testing your internal controls, specific over financial reporting. We test compliance with various components of the financial elements of the district. We're required to complete a federal, what's called a single audit, specifically of your federal awards that you receive, which is guided by federal standards. And then lastly, we audit your compliance with state laws and regulations. The Office of the State Auditor gives us a list of the laws that we test. We don't test every state law, just those that's on their list. So as part of the audit, we issue what's called a management report. And the management report is a tool that we use as a firm to provide the results of the audit in a format that is really a presentation format, but also is a tool in a read that you could look at to get a sense for how the audit went, the audit results, without listening to my presentation. So it's dual purpose, but in this sense, I'm going to go through some of the highlights of that management report so that you can understand the audit results. So first and foremost, we did issue 8 opinions as part of this process. The first one is on the district's financial report. We were able to issue a clean opinion on that financial statement. It's actually technically called an unmodified opinion. We like to use the word clean because it's a little more understandable. So you were able to get the opinion you were looking for going into the audit process. We did, as mentioned, test your internal controls. We do have one reportable item with regard to your internal controls. Going into the audit, we understand that the district is only a certain size, and it only has a certain size business office, and you have really what's defined as limited segregation of duties within that office. So as part of our audit, we know that and look for what's called compensating controls. We look for controls that are in place that compensate for limited segregation of duties that are, or maybe better characterized as, are consistent with what would be found in an office of your size. So we report that here in our results that show, yeah, we do have what's called a reportable item, but it really is not a finding in my book, but it is something you should be aware of as a board. So we do continue to list out the opinions that were issued. I've mentioned the single audit of federal awards. We did not have any findings to report in that particular area. The last opinion that we issued related to the Minnesota compliance with Minnesota state statutes. We did have one finding this year in particular to a performance bond. It is a requirement in state law that the district receive both payment bonds and performance bonds for any bids that are completed for contracts exceeding $175,000 in statute. One bid that we tested did not have a performance bond received by the district as part of that process. This particular contract was a bit unusual in that the original bids actually there was one provider that was providing a bid, and as such, with that particular contract, there was some, if you will, negotiation that went on because there was only one vendor. It was changed, and the process kind of went on, kind of back and forth in terms of changing the contract. But ultimately, as part of the process, the contract was good, and the payment bond was received, but the performance bond was not, in particular, related to, I think it was a lighting project, if I remember right, in earlier discussions today. So what does that mean for the district? One of the characteristics that I always say when it comes to an audit is going to have findings. It is intended to find, not intended to find out findings, but it does, as part of the process. The focus from a board perspective should be not only that there's a finding, because there is, but what is the corrective action? What are we going to do to correct it so that it doesn't happen again? And certainly the district has communicated this finding and the results to their administration. They've written corrective action plans that are been submitted as part of the process, and they fully anticipate that this finding won't be continuing in the future, which should be the focus. So continuing on, an audit really, to me, has two parts. The first part being how are you doing from a compliance perspective. The second part is how are you doing from a financial perspective. So we have a lot of graphs in my management report that go through the financial results. We start on this particular graph with comparing yourself to other districts in the state. This particular presentation shows a ratio that's used pretty widely in school district accounting, which is a fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. The district actually uses it in their own fund balance policy, albeit their calculation is a little bit different than what we see here. This is an actual statewide calculation that is widely used by the Minnesota Department of Education, really their statutory operating debt formula. And you can see in this graph that most districts, the statewide fund balance as a percentage of expenditures are roughly 20%. You can see that's been pretty consistent over the last several years. I would say that many metro area districts have a less percentage of debt than that for 20%, and more greater Minnesota has higher percentage than that, but blend them together and you end up with about 20%. You can see the district, the Monterey School District's fund balance has declined over the last few years, and we'll get into some of those results as we look at the individual fund perspective, but certainly as we discussed earlier in a meeting, as we talked about the audit results, the financial results are trending more positive. We saw a pretty significant decline in 2018. This year we did see some small decline in fund balance, but not to the level that we experienced certainly last year. But the signs look good to the future. We also provide information here in our management report on again, comparables. This particular presentation shows governmental funds, pretty much all your operating funds on a per student basis. So you see revenues per student served. So in 2019, the district has total revenues of about $14,621 per student. So you can see the comparables there. The district actually receives less revenues on a per student basis than comparable metro area averages. It's about $1,500 per resident less than a comparable district. Most of that kind of shows up in the state aid categories. There's a variety of reasons for that. Really, it's portrayed here more from a knowledge perspective than it is to dive into why that is. It certainly is something to be aware of as you look at the information. You are receiving less dollars than other comparable districts. What that means to you, however, is you have less dollars to spend. So you would fully anticipate that this graph would show that, and it does. This is governmental expenditures per student in the general fund, non-capital. In 2018, you spent $11,783 per student, when on average metro area was $11,400. So almost $800, $900 per student less in spending, and that goes right back to there's less available dollars for you. One of the characteristics of this particular graph that I found in preparing for this was a trend that you don't see very often at all, if ever, in that your overall spending per student actually went down. And that goes back to what Bill said in his leading comments, is you made significant cuts in your overall spending, and it is reflected certainly in this audit. The line that stands out to me is in the elementary, secondary, regular instruction. We spent $200 and some, almost $300 less per student in that category. Certainly the impact is shown here, of the changes that were made to help improve the overall financial results of the district. So kind of get into the individual fund financial results. The district did see a decline in fund balance of roughly, well, it's almost break even. It's about 100,000 was the number. I'm going to check my notes so I don't miss it. The decline in fund balance was a decrease of roughly 165,000. So given a $40 million operation, pretty much broke even for the year. This particular graph does show some 10-year historical information that I'm not going to get into deeply, but you did have a break-even year when it comes to your financial results. That's actually better than projections. I think the projections were showing for the budget were showing a spend out of about $700,000. So you did better than the budgeted results. On this particular page, we do break it down into a spreadsheet. Got accountants love spreadsheets, so we got the spreadsheet. I'm taking your place. But this is important really as a policy perspective, and really one of the highlights of this particular presentation is right here. The district does have a fund balance policy that states that you will strive, I gotta get the words right, strive to maintain a minimum unassigned fund balance of 8%. And you can see at the end of the year, this audit shows that you're at 4.2% of operations. So what that means to the district from our perspective as an auditor is certainly what are the actions that we're taking when you look at that. Your fund balance policy does an excellent job of putting forth what you're going to do. Here, when this happens, we're going to implement these policies and these procedures, and that's happening. Talking to the superintendent and the finance office, those things are happening. And really, that's what, as an auditor, all I need to hear. You have a policy. You have a level that you have in front of us. If that happens, here what we're going to do, we're taking action. So excellent job by part of the board and the administration in reacting to such a policy and really reacting to the financial results positively. So we do also want to reflect a couple things in this audit. I will always characterize this in this particular section, which is, as Bill mentioned, this audit's 5 months old. We're just November, and we're talking about June 30th. But what's important is, well, did the audit results actually mimic what the budget said? And they really did this year. In the revenue area, the revenues came within 1.3% of budget projections, and expenditures came in, I'm going to get the number because it is kind of an exceptional number, actually. So expenditures were under budget by 100,000, 0.3%. So you're talking a $40 million operation that the budgeting results came in within 100,000. That's incredible, actually, and very rare to be that close. So what that means to the board is all that data that you got for the last 12 months about financial information and budgets, it can be used to make informed decisions. It held true to closer than even I would have expected it to. So that's good. That's a very positive thing as a board to know that all that data you're getting from your finance officer, your superintendent on financial information is good and can be relied on. So I'm going to cover all that much. We do have other governmental funds that are operating: the food service fund, the community service fund. You can see the food service fund had a very flat fund balance here. The community service fund did have a decline, but in fund balance, but that was very planful. If you look at the budget, that was expected in the budget, and there was even some capital dollars that were spent there too. That are generally, usually one time when it comes to community service fund. So again, very even with the decline, I think we talked about in our meeting earlier, the overall operating fund balance as a percentage of that operation is like 22%. So they do have sufficient fund balance to operate that fund going forward. So I did want to, I'm going to back up once. The last item really I wanted to bring up on operating funds. The district does actually run an internal service fund, and it runs to account for the self-insured insurance plan that you have. The financial results in this particular audit do show that that fund is at a deficit position. It's about $700,000. That particular fund is an internal service fund, so it's really operating as it's on its own and charging other funds for its operations. So one of the recommendations that was made as part of this audit was that that particular fund would need to find a way to eliminate that deficit over time. It doesn't have to be one time, it doesn't need to be a planful thing. And the actions have been taken on the part of the superintendent and finance office to build that into some of the planning, and that is happening as we speak. So, in summary, I was able to issue a clean opinion on the financial report of the organization. We had the one reportable item on internal controls. We had one legal compliance finding, in particular to the performance bond. I mentioned the internal service fund deficit that you're working towards eliminating. And the Certificate of Achievement in Financial Reporting is an excellent document. If you get a chance, one of the board members was mentioning the statistical information in there. There's over 40 pages of excellent information on statistics that you don't always see. So it's a really good document. And then lastly, certainly we talked about the fund balance policy and the actions that are taken there. So overall, very positive audit results. And with that, I can open it up to any questions that you might have for me.
A performance bond, is that when they say if we don't hit these benchmarks, we will do X or give you discounts or something like that? That's what a performance bond is?
Yeah, the performance bond is a bond that assures you that they're going to perform, meaning they're going to do the work. And if they don't do the work, the bond is really an insurance policy that says, well, if those guys don't do the work, we'll do it, or we'll find somebody to do it. So it's really an insurance product.
Seems like money set aside or something?
Well, it's more, they are, the vendor in this case is required to buy a bond from an insurance agency that they provide to the district that says, here's my insurance policy.
Right.
So if I don't perform, you have some insurance that says somebody will, or the broker in that case, the insurance agent will make it work.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? Go.
The separation of duties has been a finding for the 15 years that I've been on this board. And in here was some plan to look at being more planful with this knowledge. is there, I mean, I'm assuming that no matter as planful as we are with the size district we are, with the size business office we have, that will just continue to come
Right.
forward.
Yeah, that was a great question. I don't anticipate that would ever go away from a segregation duty standpoint. I don't think any auditor that would stand here would say that would go away. Part of what you need to be planful of is if you're gonna change something within your business office, you have to be planful that you don't eliminate the compensating controls. That's where the planful nature of it comes in. You can't just disrupt your finance office because there's certain structure there that's working, even though it's not perfectly segregated.
So I have another question. On page 15 of this book, it seems as if there's been it must be a categorization or something has changed in the pension plan deferments.
Yep.
And is that an audit? Is that like just a change in the overall auditing system to reflect, because it shows quite a difference there, and then on page 19. Am I on the right track?
You are.
Or it's just a change in accounting practices?
It's not actually a change in accounting practices. So the question relates to your district and every governmental entity is required by rule to report your share of the unfunded obligations of the statewide pension plans. So in this case, you're involved in TRA and PERA. And so governmental accounting standards is requiring you in your report to report your share of their unfunded obligations, right? So this year, what you're seeing in your report, TRA is much improved. They have a significant improvement in the overall funding of their particular plan. So what that means to you is your portion of their unfunded plan got much smaller, right? So you're reporting significantly less liabilities for TRA in your report.
And that's because we had to increase the percentage of money flowing into that fund in a couple different ways, right?
Yes, yeah, which is probably not directly at Montevideo District, but statewide, that's happening.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I just had a comment, and I was thanking you for all the statistical information and all of your accuracy, that we can always rely on the information you're giving us. It's very, very helpful. And if everyone hasn't had a chance to look at all of those statistics, it's interesting. So, there's a lot of them.
Madam Chair, just one quick comment. Jim's role, as I mentioned in the opening, and I should have said this, is to present the 18-19 results. But it bears noting that the operating levy from 2018, November of 2018, was taxes payable in calendar 2019 for our district taxpayers, and the first year of the revenue is in our current year, 2019-20, which is why you don't see any of the additional levy revenue on this document. You'll see it on next year's audit report, but that's when you're doing the comparables and the expenditures and revenue year over year, that's why you don't see that increase in levy revenue. It's for this year. Just wanted to make that note.
Thank you for the clarification. Motion to approve the audit?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second?
Moved by Kevin, second by Mike. Any other questions, comments, discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, for all your work. Next on the agenda, we have the approval of the joint powers agreement for election services with Washington County. This was exciting reading. Bill?
A much more streamlined agenda item here.
Okay.
And I just have very, very brief comments. What you see in front of you is what the board chair had mentioned. This outlines the election-related roles and responsibilities for both the school district and Washington County as it relates to elections in the areas of the different parties, obviously, services, county and school district responsibilities, outlines responsibilities related to recounts, legal representation, price, independent contractor, and duration and termination related to the agreement. The current agreement in place, I believe, was from 2011, and so this is just simply updating that agreement now for current.
So there's no changes in the document from before? We're just carrying over what we've done in the past?
No,
I'm sorry.
there are changes. The changes are related to some changes in statute.
Okay.
So in particular, the school district responsibilities, letter E, there are some changes there. But again, it aligns with our practice and it aligns with statute there. There's also some language changes that give a little more flexibility to how it is that the county is approving their fees in general, the way the county's operating. So previously, we had a flat fee for what it would be, and now there's a table related to the actual expenditures. So that's an update as well. And we did double check to make sure it wasn't, these additional costs once you add them all up. And truly it's that we're being asked to pay for the services that we use and nothing more. So and actually, I think we found that it was actually a little bit less than what we would have been paying previously when we just had the flat fee. So Laura looked into that for us.
It's very transparent in the way it's written now. Before it was a flat fee, we didn't know what we were paying for in a sense, and now we do. So I appreciate that. Other questions, comments?
Julie, I have a question. So in the document where it says school district clerk, that's not school board clerk, or is it? Or is it you?
It's
you.
likely.
Okay,
it's
Laura's
likely
usually
Laura.
the election contact, so I was just curious.
I don't know where it says clerk, but anything that's related to the school district responsibilities. Or
Yes,
designee.
it's for recount. So I was just curious who the school district clerk was referring to.
For the recount, I assume that would be you.
Well, I don't know, or is it Laura? I mean, anyway, I was just,
It would be you in that you would sign any of the documents,
okay,
but
And your
I,
support.
but I'm the support that deals with the county.
okay.
So I don't know if that got caught on, okay, so Laura is saying that you are, for the recount, you are the clerk,
Okay,
and Laura is the support. She is the official school district when it comes to what the school district is responsible for. She's the designee,
okay,
and so she is the support for all of that.
okay. I was just trying to clarify how those roles would, what that would look like. Sure.
You know, we're not pilots.
I don't want to count ballots, but I was curious.
Just got curious. Good question. Anything else on this document? I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the joint powers agreement.
So moved.
Any second? Moved by Mike, second by Julie. Any other discussion? No discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. One more action item tonight, or information item.
It is an
Action,
action,
sorry.
the approval of the 2021 school calendar. And you have it in your packet, I'll just highlight that we will be starting school a little later than usual, just due to the way the Tuesday after Labor Day falls is on the 8th. Then the last day of school would be June 10th, 2021. Spring break is the week of March 8th. I think those are probably the key planning components for most people. And you can see the rest here in the packet. I will say that also in March, we are planning to have a study session with some additional conversation about the calendar for 21. sorry, this is difficult, 21, 22, my gosh. So we'll have that conversation in March in the study session. One thing we want to look at is the results of our e-learning day, what kind of feedback we get from that, and how does that affect our planning in the future. And then also there's some interest in having more assessment days in the fall for our elementary grades. And that, so we do it for kindergarten right now, and there's some interest in potentially doing that for other grades as well. And so we want to have more of a discussion about that. So we'll be doing that at our March study session before approving the 21-22 calendar. But what you have in front of you is the 2021 calendar, and I think the main highlights are the ones I pulled out from before, unless Stacy, you had other things.
I would just add that it is a bit problematic that we have to start after Labor Day, but that is state law. And unless we get an exception, which we don't need any of the exceptions. So it's making our calendar quite challenging. So I just want to point that out. It's something we cannot change, and so we have to work within that.
Any other questions or comments on the calendar?
Move approval?
Second.
Moved by Kevin, second by Stacy. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have a calendar. Thank you. That committee, I know, is very hard work. Stacy, thank you for representing us at that meeting. Next, we have school board committee reports, starting with AMSD.
Don't have anything.
So I can just, mine will be brief. Most of the most recent AMSD meeting was to go over the position papers legislative platform, and those are all online, so you can review those. Everything's in draft form there. We did hear from Dennis Olson, who is the Commissioner for Higher Education, and I know him as, he used to work for MDE. He was our Director of Indian Education, and so that was my familiarity with him, so it was nice to see him again, and also nice to hear him talk about really reimagining higher education also and how things work there. He talked a little bit about how it is that we use test scores, standardized test scores for admissions, and thinking differently about that, and just connecting with communities of underrepresented folks who have been underrepresented historically in higher education, and being a real advocate for connecting with people from those communities. So it was nice to see him, it was great to hear from him and have that connection with our K-12 as well, because he clearly has that connection. So I'd say that would be the highlights for AMSD.
In your superintendent's report, we talk about the conference this week, or are we going to talk about that later?
The student conference?
No, the
Oh.
AMSD.
Yesterday.
Oh, yesterday's conference. I could, or you could talk about it, because we had a number of people in attendance.
I was not able to attend, so I'm just curious how.
Stacy and Kevin and I attended.
Good.
I thought it was quite interesting, what Minneapolis Schools has done, with making sure that all the voices, parents, again, of typically been underserved groups, make sure those voices are heard. The way they explained it is, for the most part, the way the model was working is it would be a push, the district would push information out and assume that parents would react to that and do all the things that parents might do, but not always, and not really listening to what the various groups were saying that are needs. And so they formed this parent advisory group yesterday, I don't know if that's all the different groups represented, but they had an African-American woman, they had a Hmong gentleman there, they had a Somali gentleman who also was he's a radio broadcast guy, he's quite articulate, and then they had a Latinx woman there, and they went through and talked about their experiences and how they're helping. And those people there were very positive about what Minneapolis Schools is doing, and Minneapolis Schools were very pleased with what they're doing. So I thought it was very worthwhile, I really did. Maybe a different, it's not quite all that would not maybe apply here, but some of it could, certainly.
Also, the information that they shared about how to communicate with families about financial information, how to frame the conversation was, I thought, really beneficial, so.
Thank you. Next, we have the Matamidi Area Educational Foundation, NAEF report. Julie?
Okay, so if everyone is aware, for all the people watching on TV, because I know there's a lot, the teacher grants opened on November 1st, and they will be open through January 17th at 5 p.m. 3 different areas: the MAEF grant, a Hanson-inspired teacher grant, or the Oliver Fund grants. So those are available at makegifts.org. I'll let Stacy talk about that one again. And then if everyone had a chance to see the pictures in the paper last week of the morning with MAEF, there's some great pictures of highlighted student activities at the high school. It was a very fun and positive event, well attended. And also last week, it was mentioned in the paper that MAEF also received a $2,000 grant to aid in the mental health initiative from the Greater White Bear Area Foundation. So, thank you.
Next is MSBA, that's mine. We have the delegate assembly coming up. Kevin and Julie are both representing District 6, so they will be reading all the resolutions and voting on those coming up in December. We also have the leadership conference coming up in January. It's the anniversary year. Is it 200 years, Kevin?
100 years.
100 years, sorry. So 200 sounds like a really long time. 100 years. And there will be a reception for past presidents during that conference. So I hope we can all go and support Kevin. That information will be coming out. Metro 916 board. Kevin?
I sent, Laura sent around the horn the annual report that was just released. And they've done it this way a couple of years in a row. And so did anybody get a chance to open that up and look at it? I think it's very, rather than having, a big beast of a thing, it's all online. And what's nice about this for 916, there's 14 member districts. And it's normal to want to look and see where Matamidi is and what services Matamidi is utilizing. And so that report makes it very easy to just click on the Matamidi tab and see how 916 and services relate to our district. So if you haven't had a chance to do that, it's well worthwhile to do. And there is a little bit of a bubble up in we're a 14-member district, but there are some districts that are outside of the membership that are interested in getting some tuition relief, shall we say, that they think that they should get a better deal than the member districts. Not quite sure how they came to that theory, but that's something that maybe we'll know more about as we move forward. So that's it.
Do you know when the gala is for 916? So we usually put something together, and our meetings are pretty spread out now. So maybe if we could figure that out before the December meeting?
I believe it's
usually in
It's
February.
usually the January.
Yeah, January, I was going to say.
Or early February.
Yeah,
Can you find that out? So in December when we meet, we can make a plan for the gala in terms of if we want to donate something.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other subcommittee reports or groups we haven't heard from?
I wasn't planning to, but Julie asked me this, so I will.
Well, last time we were arguing about who's going to talk.
I know, but we haven't had a community advisory meeting since we last met. So, but I will point out that the Tree of Light remembrance ceremony is December 6th and you can purchase a light for that. There's also the weekend backpack program that it looks like is in alignment with that, and that's where the money will, all the donations will go to the food shelf program.
Thank you. And Superintendent's Report.
Just a few things. Well, first, hey, thanks for coming out, everybody. It's been a long day at conferences, and here you are again, so thanks for doing that. I will say that I had the opportunity, since we last were together, to see the scary but not too scary stories. I don't think I got to tell you that yet, right? Okay, so if you didn't get, I'm sorry you missed it, if you didn't get a chance, but it was the middle school fall production, and if you follow me, you know how much I love middle schoolers on stage. And so I will say that was a really fun production. And so thanks to those who worked on that. I also, we made you talk about the section swim meet, but I was there and documented your swim. So also a very fun and packed event there, standing room only there at the section swim meet. I want a little shout out to our MAPS team, our Mapping a Protein Story team, who came and presented it. We're going above and beyond and presented at TEDx Matamidi this year. And so we've seen them before, we've been impressed with them many times, and then they just keep on finding another place to spread their wisdom. So thanks to them, and thanks to Kevin for being the MC for TEDx Matamidi. I also want to highlight, I've been in the high school this week, I think, is it just this week? That's it, it's only this week that I've been there, but looking at the biology posters. What I love about what's happening there, and I think it's Mr. Lane and Ms. Schaefer's classes, is that's a project that they did last year that I got to see, the human impact on the environment. I think it was was it similar when we went to it last year? I think it was. But the evolution of the project, so this is their next time through, and just to see how much different the project was, and the expectations had changed, and the products the students were displaying was just really impressive. And it was fun to get to talk to the students about that. And then I also spent some time in the engineering lab, getting to learn about students going through the design process and building a lifeboat. And my favorite was Ryan today. So Ryan showed us the lifeboat, and then we judged and asked questions, everything. And then at the end of the day, at the end of the period, he needed to come back in because he had thought more about what he needed to improve and came back to bring it again. So those are the kinds of projects we just love to see, because it just shows the student thinking, students being able to talk about their projects, students being able to dig in deeply on something that matters to them. And so I just want to highlight that because it was a really fun.
Barb, I went to Mr. Lane's class on Tuesday morning because my daughter was in World Group out there, and saw that and walked around and asked questions. That was really, really interesting.
So that's it. That's what I have for today.
So I kind of heard a rumor that there was a design challenge to make some kind of a boat out of recyclable kind of plastics or something and go across Viper Lake. Is that, am I just making it up?
No, you're not making that up.
Okay, good.
But,
Phew.
Eco Club.
and if we scroll back
Is that
on
Eco
Twitter,
Club?
we can find that. Okay, yes.
Okay,
Eco Club.
all right,
Okay.
but do we know when that's gonna happen? Because that would be fun to go.
Yeah, well, I see, if there's somebody in the audience that knows something about it, maybe, and maybe we can quiz her later. Okay. It seems. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Next, I'm looking for a motion to close the meeting to discuss labor negotiation strategies or developments in closed session per to statute 13D03, teacher contract negotiations. Looking for a motion.
So
Moved by Kevin, second by Julie. All those in favor of going to closed session, say aye.
Aye.
We're going to move to closed session. At the end of closed session, we'll open the meeting to adjourn, so there won't be any other business that happens tonight. So if you want to watch us adjourn, please stick around. But there won't be any other action or agenda items after that. So as we move to closed session, if you could please exit the room, we appreciate it.